Venezuelan President Maduro devalued the currency by 96% and pegged it to the state-backed cryptocurrency, the petro. He also raised the minimum wage by 3,500% in an attempt to deal with its hyperinflation crisis. Joining me now from Baltimore is Professor Steve Hanke. He's a professor of applied economics at the Johns Hopkins University and is one of the world's leading experts on hyperinflation. He served as an advisor to Venezuela's President Rafael Caldera in 1995 to 96. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, I understand that you measure Venezuela's inflation every day. I think you measured it around 65,500% one day this week. And the IMF is predicting that it'll reach 1 million% this year. So what tends to happen to an economy in terms of jobs and businesses when inflation gets out of control like this?
Well, the main thing that you do is you get rid of those hot potatoes called bolivars as fast as you possibly can and buy anything you can. I mean, if there's something to buy, that's a big problem in Venezuela. There are shortages of everything, so sometimes it's difficult to buy a bag of sugar or something like that. But the other thing you can always do is go to the black market or the free market and exchange your bolivars for dollars, and that's what's been going on. It's called currency substitution. So if you get a big hyperinflation, let's take the extreme case of, well, you have Yugoslavia in 1994 in January. They just simply stopped printing the Yugoslav dinar because they couldn't redenominate the thing fast enough. They couldn't take off the zeros fast enough because the inflation was 313 million% per month. Now, the other one, a classic case, is Zimbabwe, November of 2008. The prices were doubling every 24 hours. That was the second highest hyperinflation in the world, and the population, they just refused to use the Zim dollar. So the economy just spontaneously, completely dollarized. But this is going on in Venezuela. I've given you two extreme cases. The second highest hyperinflation in the world was in Zimbabwe 2008, and the third highest was Yugoslavia, January of 1994. So that's what happens. At the end of the day, everyone just bails out of the currency and they stop using it.
So dollarization appears to be the key there, nothing to do with the bolivar and this devaluation there. But what's likely to be the knock-on effects for the likes of jobs and businesses and the economy more broadly?
Well, if they continue with the same system that they have, there will be one after another currency reforms with new names for the bolivar and many zeros taken off, and they will be in a death spiral that will eventually end at some point in time. We don't know. You mentioned the IMF forecast of 1 million% by the end of this year. This is just irresponsible on the part of the IMF and indicates their incompetence, because you can't forecast the course or the duration of a hyperinflation. I can measure it today very, very accurately. In fact, today's rate, it's come down a little bit. It's 51,836% today on an annual basis. The monthly rate is about 137%, meaning it's still in hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is over 50% per month has to be the reading, and we have 137% right now in Venezuela. So it's the only country hyperinflating. And there have only been 58 hyperinflation episodes in world history. They're not that common, actually. They're rather uncommon.
So if inflation is coming down very slightly, does that mean that President Maduro's measures are working just a little bit?
No, not really, because the inflation the day before they did the so-called currency reform was about the same level as that. It fluctuates. It's volatile. It's particularly volatile around the time of a transition to some new system, because everyone's very confused They really don't know what's happening to them. And so I anticipate that the bolivar, the new sovereign bolivar, will be even more volatile than the old bolivar was for a bit of time, and then things will get back on track again once people figure out that nothing has really changed except the appearance of the bills that they have.
So to what extent is the Maduro regime to blame here for the economic slump? Because the IMF, I know you were slightly scathing of their forecast, but they say that GDP has shrunk by 45% since he came to power in 2013.
Well, it's almost solely the fault of the Maduro regime, and it's really socialism in action. The dustbin of history is filled with socialist economies that have completely collapsed. Of course, the Soviet Union is a huge case in point, but in any case, a lot of people say, well, this is because the price of oil went down. This has almost nothing to do with the whole situation. The price of oil went down, then it came back up, but in the meantime, the production of oil from the state-owned oil company PDVSA in Venezuela is gone down, 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 and now it's back at the 1947 production level. So it's just an incredibly incompetent operation of everything going on in Venezuela. And then many people say, well, yes, but after all, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. I've analyzed this very carefully, and they exploit those reserves at such a slow rate that the average barrel of oil coming out of the reserves comes out after 193 years. So if you compare that to Exxon and Exxon's reserves, the average barrel of oil comes out of reserves owned by Exxon in about 8 years. And all the major oil companies, that's more or less the standard, 8 or 9 years for the average barrel of oil to be recovered. Well, in Venezuela, the recovery rate is 193 years. So if you apply any kind of discount rate to those oil reserves that are being extracted by PDVSA, you end up with the reserves being equal to zero. I mean, if they keep it, so those assets aren't really assets, and they talk about this currency, the petro, that's being backed by oil reserves. Well, there's just one little problem. The petro doesn't even circulate. It doesn't exist. It's a fiction. The whole thing is a sham.
So you talked about the oil market there. What do you think the Venezuelan crisis is likely to mean for the price of oil? Are we going to see WTI and Brent push higher over coming months?
Well, I have my forecasting models, and here this is forecasting. This isn't measuring, and this is something you actually can forecast the price of oil pretty accurately. At least I've been doing it that way for years, and I see WTI at $75 a barrel by the end of the year. That's a bit higher than it is now. It's a little under 70, but I think it will keep gradually going up and reverting back to the mean. The oil is related to the price of gold. There's what I call an oil-gold ratio, and that over long periods of time is fairly constant. And it got out of whack, of course, when oil collapsed, and now it's reverting back to the mean slowly. Actually, not so slowly. It takes a little over 13 months to retrace 50% of its course if it's been thrown off course.
All right, Professor Hankey, thanks so much for your time. That was Professor Steve Hanke from the Johns Hopkins University. I'm Victoria Scholar. Thank you so much for watching IGTV, and remember to find me on Twitter for more updates. I'm at VictoriaS_IG. See you soon.
Subscribe to IG for educational content, company insight, financial analysis and expert commentary.